Hi, greetings everyone. Welcome to this episode of Sea Hunters. I'm your host, Randy Morton, and I have with us today the pioneer of blue water spearfishing in St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Charles Gaskell, who will share his experiences at sea with us. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Once again on the Boston Whale, about to dive the South Point. Let's see how it goes. I started spearfishing in 2011. Admittedly a lot later than most of the folk around here, but I had a deep grounding in line fishing and an understanding of what it took to find where big fish presided. So I think my first trip to Florida in 2015 really opened my eyes to the possibilities of what I could do here in Nevis. I dove with 4 experienced fellows shooting cobia off the back of bull sharks. It was sort of a baptism of fire from which I'd be able to launch my own spearfishing in Nevis. It also allowed me to break down my fear of sharks because the environment in Florida was more sharks than any other kind of fish. I target wahoo because they fascinate me. They are regarded by the Blue Water Spearfishing fraternity as one of the trickier fish to target. They are susceptible to scaring. They themselves, as you'll see later on in the clips, are prey, so they display that slightly neurotic tendency to take off at the slightest fast move. So really they fascinated me, and I had a background already in catching them on hook and line. So I had an idea of where to start my diving excursions. So yes, I would say the wahoo was my inspiration and the first fish that I started targeting. From there, of course, other fish come into picture. The area that I dive for wahoo also holds fish like tuna and marlin and mahi-mahi, so they became targets as well. You have to be as silent as possible and really blend into the surroundings as a non-threatening element. You really have to allow them to approach you. I mean, chasing a 60 mile per hour fish at 2 miles per hour it just is not going to result in a capture. So you have to find ways to get the fish to come to you. In some of the clips you can see sort of hand waving, an octopus type hand. That just catches the fish's attention. I'm not sure whether it depicts another fish's mouth closing or squid tentacles. It just catches their attention, and as you'll be able to see in some of the clips, the fish turn when they see the hand movement and allow a closer shot. A blue water spearfisher's gear has to be fine-tuned to perfection, otherwise a whole host of things can go wrong. Chafe, for instance, can cut line. As you're finalizing a battle with a fish, if the spear line rubs on a sharp part of your belt, for instance, it can cut under tension. Also, if you haven't got the right kind of shooting line, it can throw up a loop, which then snares the rubbers on its way out and doesn't allow the spear to travel. I learned you can't shoot a fish while on the surface because the surface action causes one's arm to raise up and down too much, and the likelihood of a missed shot is very high. When I first started, I would have a boat in attendance, and as I developed a way to drift with the boat using a parachute as a sea anchor. It's a very effective way of conserving fuel costs and slowly covering an area that you want to dive. Blue water spearfishing isn't for the faint-hearted. Big seas, a rocking boat, gear that's not always comfortable, bulky guns to dive with, predators whose only intention is to take away your meal. I would have to say that blue water spearfishing is the single coolest thing I've ever done in my life, and I feel extremely privileged to live in a place where I can have world-class spearfishing practically year-round on a daily basis. But it isn't quite as easy as that. We have terrible seas here during the winter time, with regular 6-foot seas being diving norm for me at Christmas. The environment isn't easy. There are predators, the sharks especially. It isn't always easy. The seas are often big. You have to have a strong stomach. And the fish underneath are often bigger. You have to have a strong heart. I've simply had to learn by experience, and some of the experiences have been life-threatening, to say the least. Safety gear is of utmost importance. I often dive alone, so having somebody on the boat to monitor me gives me the confidence. The sea is a great teacher, and time on it is the only way to really learn. I don't keep my knowledge secretive. I try and share it. I know that the experience is so tough that very few people will actually follow through and join or even branch off on their own blue water spearfishing. And with the conservationist mind that I've developed over the years of living here, that is living here and seeing the habitat loss and fish stock loss that we've suffered just during the short time that I've lived, say 30 years. So yes, conservation has become a key element in my strategy, and probably something that influenced me to get into spearfishing because it is so selective. So I get the chance to size up a fish, and if I decide that it's a juvenile, I can make the decision not to shoot it. It's not always easy. The environment is dangerous. The apex predators are sharks, and they develop an understanding very quickly of how to get their food. So my introduction into their environment and my shooting, maiming and fighting with fish has allowed them to learn that when I'm on the scene, there's the possibility of a free meal. So a lot of the fish that I take, and increasingly more year after year, are taken in slightly dicey circumstances. That's when it's important to focus on how you shoot a fish. A lot of people shoot a fish where they see the biggest mass, which is the middle of the body. And though that might result in a capture, with a big fish like a wahoo, a middle body shot normally results in a rocket ship takeoff and a drawn-out fight. A struggling fish emits distress frequencies that the shark is designed to respond to. So any fish that I shoot, I try and shoot as securely as possible. In general, you want to hit the spine or the brain. The brain, obviously being a slightly smaller target than the spine, is harder to hit, but anywhere on the spine near the head, will render the fish incapable and an easy landing. When I don't shoot a fish ideally and the struggle ensues, my only intention is to land the fish as quickly as possible and kill it to prevent it emitting further distress frequencies to excite the sharks. During the course of my first 2 years doing this, I had very few shark encounters, just sightings but no fish interactions. It was in my 3rd year that I really started to learn about the real threat that the sharks posed to my fishery. I'd shot a fish on the Monkey Shoals, and I'd shot it just at the top of the belly cavity behind the pectoral fin. So it had no bone damage and was just a very irritated fish. It took off, submerging the float out of view. I couldn't tell which way the float had gone and swam up sea. Unfortunately, this proved to be the wrong direction, as the float was soon identified 100 yards down the sea when it re-emerged. I swam back to it and fought the line. At about 70 feet, I started seeing sharks encircling my fish. By 30 feet, the first one took its first bite, and when a shark takes a bite and blood is spilled, if there are other sharks in the area, a frenzy ensues. A frenzy did ensue, and my fish was quickly reduced to but a plug, the head and a couple of meals. I didn't have anything at home in my freezer, so I was desperate. I think I had, at the time, a backlog of pounds and pounds of smoked wahoo ordered, and I had to get the piece of fish in. In hindsight, just the wrong way to act.
Hey folks, I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'd like to thank Mr. Charles Gaskell for sharing his experiences with us, and I know that you enjoyed the show as well. Persons have been meeting me on the streets and have been saying how they enjoy the show, so please continue to do that and continue to stay tuned to NTV, and as always, I'll catch you next time on Sea Hunters.